I never thought the day would come when I'd be humiliated in front of my worst enemy, but it did. And when it happened, I had to remind myself that he had no idea who I really was. The girl he kicked in front of his friends? Yeah, that's me. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I owned his company and had a $70 billion inheritance waiting for me. That kick? It would cost him everything. It was a typical Friday evening, the kind where people are either heading to the bar after work or looking forward to the weekend to unwind. I had no intention of being anywhere near the public eye, let alone making a grand entrance into a swanky VIP-only club. Yet that's exactly where I ended up. All I wanted was a quiet night to myself, but my cousin had other ideas. He was persistent, and soon enough I found myself slipping into something a bit more revealing than usual, for once giving in to his persistent pleadings. The lights were flashing, the music was pulsing in my chest, and people were everywhere. It was like stepping into a different world. Expensive clothes, sparkling jewels, and designer shoes on every foot. But none of that mattered to me. I wasn't here for the glamorous crowd. I wasn't even here for the drinks. I was here for him, Jonathan King. He had been my enemy for as long as I could remember, a man who never hesitated to belittle or insult me whenever he could. His arrogance was legendary, and I knew that even being in the same room as him would make me seethe with anger. But this wasn't just any regular club night. No, tonight was personal. The moment I stepped inside, I immediately saw him. He was surrounded by his usual entourage, friends who only admired him for his wealth and power. The man didn't know the first thing about loyalty. He was the type to throw anyone under the bus if it helped his ego or made him feel superior. And tonight I was going to make sure he felt small. But I wasn't going to do it the way he expected. I walked up to the bar, acting as if I hadn't noticed him yet. But, of course, Jonathan noticed me. He always did. He never passed up a chance to make a snide comment or belittle me in front of others. I could feel his eyes on me from the moment I entered, just waiting for the opportunity to make a mockery of me. And, of course, it came. A couple of drinks into the night, I turned to find him grinning at me from across the bar. He was holding court with his friends as usual, laughing loudly, making himself the center of attention. The smile that crept across his face as he spotted me made my skin crawl. But I wasn't going to let him win this time. Well, if it isn't the quiet little girl who thinks she can play with the big boys, he called out from across the bar, his voice dripping with that familiar smugness. I took a deep breath. I had a plan, and I wasn't about to let him ruin it. As I walked over to him, I made sure my heels clicked loudly, commanding the attention of everyone around us. His friends looked at me, some curious, some amused, but I could see the way Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Is this your idea of getting attention?" he mocked, tilting his glass toward me, clearly ready to insult me as he always did. But this time it wasn't just me in the spotlight. It was him too. I leaned in close to him, close enough that only he could hear what I was about to say. "You think you can just walk all over me, Jonathan?" I whispered. "You really have no idea who I am, do you?" He smirked, ready to brush off the comment, but then I did something I'd never done before. I pushed him. Just a light shove, nothing too forceful, but enough to unbalance him. And before anyone could react, he stumbled backward, knocking into one of his friends and landed flat on his back in front of everyone. The room went silent for a split second, and I could see the shock on his face. He scrambled to get up, his pride wounded, but before he could say anything, I spoke again, my voice dripping with venom. "Let me guess. You didn't think a girl like me would dare do something like this, did you?" I stepped back, giving him space, but my eyes never left his. "What are you even talking about?" He was furious now, his anger bubbling over as he wiped dirt from his suit. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my friends? You're nothing but a joke." If you are enjoying this story, please tell us the county you are watching from, and please comment, like, and share this story. I smiled, letting him continue to belittle me, but inside, I was seething with satisfaction. The way he looked right now, humiliated, confused, and furious, was exactly what I had hoped for. "Tell you what, Jonathan," I said coolly, "it's a shame you don't know who you're really talking to. But you will soon enough." He raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What's that supposed to mean? I wasn't about to tell him yet, but as I walked away from him, I couldn't help but smirk. In a few moments, everything was about to change for him. I slipped out of the club, my heart racing with a combination of exhilaration and anticipation. Jonathan had no idea what was coming. He thought he had me figured out. He thought he had humiliated me in front of everyone. but he had no idea who I really was. Later that night, as I sat in the back of a private car, the reality of what was about to unfold hit me. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from my lawyer, the one I had hired to manage my inheritance. The documents are ready. You can access the account now. $70 billion awaits you. You can claim what's rightfully yours at any time. I stared at the message in shock. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I could finally stop pretending to be just a regular girl and step into the powerful, untouchable role I was destined to play. But the thought of Jonathan still pissed me off. He thought he was the one who could wield power. He thought he could walk all over me. But it wasn't him. It was me. And soon he would learn the hard way that some people are meant for greatness, while others, no matter how much they think they've won, are just destined to lose. The days following that night were a whirlwind of emotions. I had spent years carefully hiding my true identity, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted control. Being the heiress to a $70 billion fortune wasn't something to flaunt casually. It would have attracted attention I didn't want, and worse, it would have put a target on my back. But now, everything had changed. The mask I'd been wearing for years was starting to crack, and Jonathan King was about to feel the consequences of that. I didn't reach out to Jonathan immediately. I didn't need to. He had humiliated me in front of his friends, but I knew that wasn't the real payback. I wasn't going to confront him in public or have some dramatic showdown. No, I was going to take everything from him in the way he least expected by quietly making him watch his empire crumble, piece by piece, until he had nothing left to hold on to. The company he ran, King Enterprises, was a family-owned business. It was a behemoth worth billions, and it seemed untouchable. But what Jonathan didn't know was that I owned a controlling stake in King Enterprises. The company, though publicly owned by his family, had been part of my inheritance. It had always been under my radar, but I had never used my influence. Until now. I could feel the power in my fingertips every time I glanced at my phone. My lawyer had sent over the papers, and after years of silence, the power to shape the future of King Enterprises was in my hands. As I walked into my office that afternoon, I tried to push the weight of it all to the back of my mind. I needed to stay calm. I needed to focus. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the night at the club. Jonathan's face. His arrogant words. His humiliation. It was all so deliciously satisfying. I wondered what he was doing now, probably wallowing in the shame I had inflicted on him. I smiled to myself as I sat down at my desk and tapped my fingers on the surface. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. This is Jonathan. I want to apologize for what happened the other night. I was out of line. Can we talk? I stared at the screen. The audacity. After everything, he thought an apology would fix it? He thought that a simple sorry would erase years of insults and humiliation? I let out a bitter laugh. He didn't understand who he was dealing with. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I sent a message to my lawyer. It was time. Begin the process of taking control. Let's make sure everything is in place to take over King Enterprises. I leaned back in my chair and waited for the response. The message I had just received from Jonathan sat on my screen, ignored. I didn't care about his apology. I cared about what was rightfully mine. The following day, I met with my lawyer in person. He was a man of few words, always precise, always calculating. As soon as I entered the office, he greeted me with a respectful nod. "Everything is ready, Miss King," he said as he handed me a folder. "The paperwork has been processed and your position is secure. You're now the majority shareholder of King Enterprises." I felt a rush of satisfaction. This wasn't just about owning the company. It was about sending a message to Jonathan and his family. It was about reclaiming the power I'd been denied for so long. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "We take control. We'll send formal notices to the board of directors and initiate a shareholder meeting. It's time to make sure Jonathan knows who's in charge," he replied. I smiled, the weight of the situation sinking in. I wasn't just a part of this world anymore. I was at the top, and Jonathan was about to find out just how powerless he truly was. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and strategic moves. Everything was falling into place, and soon King Enterprises would be under my complete control. I'd be able to shape the company into something bigger, something more aligned with my vision, but first I had to deal with Jonathan. I needed him to understand that he had no say in the company anymore, and that meant making sure his position at the helm was threatened. I didn't want to play nice anymore. He had humiliated me, and now it was time for him to feel the consequences of his actions. Jonathan wasn't stupid. He knew something was off the moment he received the official notice about the shareholder meeting. When I showed up, he was waiting for me, dressed in his usual expensive suit, trying to put on an air of confidence. But I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. He stood up as I walked into the conference room, a forced smile on his face. "What's this all about?" he asked, trying to hide his nervousness behind a veil of bravado. I leaned against the table, watching him closely. "Jonathan, I thought you'd be happy. After all, it's not every day that you get to meet the new majority shareholder of your company. Congratulations, by the way. You're officially out of a job." His eyes widened in disbelief. What are you talking about?" I could feel the power shift in the room. The tension was palpable. Every word I spoke made him more desperate, and it was exactly what I wanted. "You didn't think your little empire would stay intact forever, did you?" I said, my voice steady but full of venom. "You kicked me in front of your friends, Jonathan. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? Well, guess what? It's not me who's going to pay the price. It's you." He looked around the room as if trying to find someone to help him, but the board members who had once been loyal to him were now silent, staring at their phones or pretending to read the documents in front of them. I could see the realization dawn on him. He was alone. "I know what you're doing," he said, his voice shaky now. "You can't just take everything from me. You don't have that power." "Oh, I do," I replied calmly. "And if you're smart, you'll step aside and leave while you still have a shred of dignity." Jonathan clenched his fists, his face turning red. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me? I built this company. It's mine." I laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "No, Jonathan. You didn't build it. You inherited it. And now it's mine." His expression was one of complete disbelief. For a moment, he looked lost, like a man who had just realized he'd lost everything in the blink of an eye. But I wasn't done. "You've always underestimated me. You thought I was weak, easy to push around. But now you're learning the hard way that I'm not the one to mess with." I turned to the board members. "It's time to vote. Jonathan's reign is over." The room was silent as the vote was cast, and it was clear what the result would be. Jonathan was finished. But even after all of this, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The revenge was sweet, but the power I now held was even sweeter. The moment the board vote was completed, I could feel the weight of everything shifting. I had just taken control of King Enterprises, the very company Jonathan thought was his legacy. The power was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to be merciful. Jonathan's once unshakable confidence was replaced by a kind of desperation I hadn't seen before. "You can't do this," he muttered, trying to salvage some pride. "This company is my family's legacy. You can't just come in here and strip it away." I leaned back in my chair, watching him closely. He was defiant, but I could see his walls crumbling. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about business. This was about showing him who was truly in control. His arrogance had blinded him for too long. Now he was facing the consequences. "Jonathan," I began, my voice cold and unrelenting. "You've been playing this game for far too long, and now you're going to lose everything. This company was never yours. You didn't build it, you didn't work for it. You were just a puppet, controlled by the wealth your family handed you. But me? I'm the one who's going to reshape this company, take it to new heights." He was seething with rage, but there was nothing he could do. His empire was crumbling, and no amount of shouting or pleading was going to stop it. His friends, who had once followed his every move, now avoided his gaze. One by one, they began to quietly file out of the room, leaving Jonathan alone with me. The silence was deafening. I could see the sweat on his brow, the way his hands trembled as he clenched them into fists. "You think you've won, don't you?" he spat. "But you've just destroyed everything I worked for. You've taken away everything I cared about." "You never cared about anything," I replied. "Not your company, not the people who worked for you. You only cared about your ego and how you could make people like me feel small. But now the tables have turned. I'm the one in charge." His eyes burned with hatred. "You won't get away with this. My family will." "Your family?" I interrupted, the venom in my tone growing stronger. "Your family has already abandoned you. They've let you ruin everything, and now it's too late. Your father may have built this company, but it's mine now, and you will never see another penny from it." His face turned pale as the reality set in. The very thing he thought was his birthright had just slipped through his fingers. I saw the weight of his loss sinking in, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered everything he had put me through, the humiliation, the belittling, the years of suffering. I couldn't feel sorry for him. Not now. As Jonathan stood there, his fists clenched and his face twisted in anger, I saw an opportunity to take the final blow. I had one last card to play, one that would leave him completely speechless. "You know, Jonathan," I said, walking toward him slowly, "you think this is about business. You think this is about the company. But it's not. It's about power. It's about respect." His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that grew wider as I stepped closer. "What you don't know, Jonathan, is that the $70 billion inheritance I've been sitting on, it wasn't just about the company. It was about freedom. The freedom to take back what was stolen from me. The freedom to stand on my own without you or anyone else pulling the strings. But now you're just a footnote in my story." He blinked, confusion overtaking the anger on his face. "What do you mean? You really don't know, do you?" I asked, a hint of amusement in my voice. "You thought I was just some girl you could push around. You thought I was nothing. But I've been quietly controlling everything from the shadows. You've been nothing but a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing." Jonathan's face drained of color as the truth hit him. No, this can't be real." I took a step back, watching as he struggled to process everything. "Oh, it's real, Jonathan. You just never saw it coming. And now you're out of a job, out of a company, and out of options. You're the one who's going to have to start over." The room was quiet, except for the sound of Jonathan's shallow breathing. He was a man who had everything handed to him, only to lose it all in the span of a few minutes. I could see the reality of his situation sinking in, and it was almost poetic how quickly everything had fallen apart for him. He slumped in his chair, defeated. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "You had your chance. But now it's my turn. And I'm going to make sure King Enterprises becomes everything you could never make it." It didn't take long for the news to spread. Within hours, media outlets were reporting the shocking takeover of King Enterprises, and Jonathan's fall from grace was all over the headlines. His family was quick to distance themselves, publicly acknowledging that Jonathan had no control over the company anymore. His own reputation crumbled, and soon he was nothing more than a memory of a man who had once believed he was untouchable. Meanwhile, I stepped into the spotlight. I made my presence known, speaking at press conferences and meeting with the board members, many of whom had previously been loyal to Jonathan. They now saw the power I held, and they began to fall in line. They saw me as a leader, someone who could take the company to new heights, and they were ready to follow. But even as I made moves to solidify my position, I couldn't help but think back to that night in the club, to the moment Jonathan kicked me in front of his friends. That moment had changed everything. It had been the catalyst that set this chain of events in motion. And now, as I looked at the empire I was about to reshape, I realized that the humiliation I had endured was nothing compared to the power I now held. As I sat in my office, looking out at the city skyline, I received a final message from Jonathan. His words were short, but they carried a heavy weight. "You won. But don't think you've defeated me. This isn't over." I smiled to myself, knowing that he was still trying to fight even after everything. But it didn't matter anymore. Jonathan was nothing now, and I was everything. "You're right," I replied. "It's not over. It's just beginning." The story of Jonathan King was over, but mine? It was only just starting. And I was going to make sure that nothing and no one would stand in my way again. What are your thoughts on this story? Let me know in the comments, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next twist.